The Kennel, Kent Hovind. The Kennel by Elijah Green, a.k.a. Kent Hovind. Introduction for The Kennel. Who on earth is Elijah Green? Actually, I hope and pray and think it is safe now, 7 years after the fact, to reveal that Elijah Green is a pseudonym for me, Kent Hovind. Let me explain. The prophet Elijah was a famous man of God in the Bible. The king hated him and sought to kill him because he preached the truth boldly and exposed the corruption in the kingdom and the sins of the king and queen. See 1 Kings 17 through 2 Kings 2. Evil men and women have always hated honest, bold, outspoken men of God who simply do their job. They can't handle the truth. John 3:19 and 20 tells us that evil men fear the light. Scores of Bible examples from Abel in Genesis to Jesus to John in Revelation show that evil men persecute good men. I've been a child of God since February 9, 1969, an ordained Baptist preacher since May 25, 1974, a high school science and math teacher for 15 years, a creation science evangelist since 1989, and an innocent man in the huge federal prison system since November 2, 2006. See details on 2peter3.com and freekenthovind.com. Since I strive to understand and boldly and openly preach the truth of God's Word, and I often expose the evil corruption, lies, or just stupidity of things that happen in our schools and government, I have made some powerful enemies too. Hence the pseudonym Elijah. At the federal prison camp in Edgefield, South Carolina, where I was in 2008 when I wrote The Kennel, we wore green, hence the name Elijah Green. I am completely embarrassed by the fact that even though I have been a serious student of the Bible for 46 years now, I completely miss the obvious fact that God's perfect word, see Psalm 12:6 and 7 and Psalm 19:7, never authorizes prisons at all. I had to come to one to see this simple truth. Under God's law, criminals were given either a fine, Exodus 22, or a beating, Deuteronomy 25, or executed, Exodus 21, depending on the crime. Only the heathen nations around Israel had prisons, and God's people often suffered in them like Joseph, Jeremiah, Daniel, Peter, Paul, and many others. For nearly 40 years of my Christian life, I was guilty of crying tough on crime and advocated the unscriptural and cruel American prison system. I was guilty of calling for long prison terms for criminals. I now see how insane and wrong this is. We are punishing the wrong people. Long prison terms are tough on families and all Americans who are forced to pay for this bloated, cruel, senseless, and ineffective system. Truly, our judges and prosecutors give out burdens grievous to be borne. Just as Jesus said in Matthew 23:4, I'm sorry, God. I've seen the light and will now help shine the light. Like Gideon's 300 did in Judges 7, please join me. For this study, Elijah Green is an average middle-aged man out for a drive in the country when he accidentally finds something that changes his course and philosophy of life. Forever, I pray it will change yours too. Just as Harriet Beecher Stowe's classic book, Uncle Tom's Cabin, opened people's eyes to the insanity of American slavery in the 1800s, and as George Orwell's 1946 story Animal Farm showed the evils of communism, I pray that the Kennel will sound an alarm and expose the evil. All for money, of course. It always is. See 1 Timothy 6:10 of our American prison industrial complex. Please share this story with others before it's too late. Chapter 1. If I had not seen it with my own eyes and heard it with my own ears, I would not have believed it. It was almost like a bad dream, only it was real. I never imagined such a place could exist in a free country. This story is so bizarre that if you were telling me, I would not believe you. Nevertheless, I was there. All I can do is relate what I saw and heard and let you decide. I never would have noticed the place if I hadn't slowed down for the cow crossing the road. Actually, I had to stop and wait while she stood right in the middle of that little traveled country road and looked at me with that blank, non-thinking stare that only cows can give. While I waited for her to slowly chew her cud and contemplate her options about what to do next, I happened to notice a reflection from a glimmering object above the trees way off, maybe 200 yards to my left. As I turned and focused, I realized it was a large area enclosed with a real tall chain-link fence topped with a shiny razor wire. Obviously where the reflection had come from. What? Why? Who? It made no sense. Well, Bessie finally discovered there was no grass in the middle of the road and slowly moseyed off into the field. But I just sat there trying to get my eyes and brain to agree on what I was seeing over in the woods. Why would anyone build such a huge fenced-in place crowned with razor wire? And why way out here in the middle of nowhere? What or who are they? Whoever they are. Keeping in, or is it out of, there? Nothing about it made sense. So being curious and mostly uninhibited by nature, I turned and slowly drove down the long, narrow drive and stopped in front of the very large gate, which was also capped with shiny razor wire. There, over the top of the gate, in giant letters, was a sign that should have satisfied but actually only intensified my curiosity. It read, State Kennel of Middletown. I unconsciously turned off the radio and rolled down the window, as if that would help me read it better. And that's when I heard it. Hundreds of dogs. They were barking, yelping, and howling in the most pitiful, heart-ripping sound I had ever heard. Immediately it brought tears to my eyes. Why would anyone lock up all these dogs? Didn't they have a home to protect somewhere? Weren't some children out there who would love them, pet them, and run around in the grass with them? Grass. It hit me. I saw lots of concrete, steel, and razor wire, but hardly any grass. It made no sense to me at all. Why were so many dogs locked up in there? Now, don't get me wrong. I know that some dogs are vicious and dangerous and need a place like this. But this place was huge. Could all these dogs be vicious and dangerous? What could it all mean? I was still trying to process all the sights, sounds, thoughts, and now smells when a nicely dressed man opened the gate and walked up to my car. "Hi," he said. "I'm John Cox, the kennel keeper. May I help you?" On his suit coat, top pocket, was a professional-looking name tag that read, John Cox, Kennel Keeper. So I knew he was serious about who he was. Still slightly confused, I smiled weakly and said, "Hi, my name is Elijah Green. I was just passing by and saw the fence. I have never noticed this place before. What is it? What do you do here?" Mr. Cox seemed pleased with my interest, almost as if he were eager to show off his kingdom, and said, "This is the newest, most advanced, state-of-the-art kennel for convicted dogs in the state. What type of work do you do, Mr. Green?" "I've worked at Springfield Hardware for the past 8 years." "My, you are ways from home. Would you like a tour of the kennel?" Mr. Cox asked. Well, being really curious now and totally unable to comprehend who, what, or why, I quickly said, "Sure." "That would be wonderful." Mr. Cox looked pleased. "We don't get many visitors way out here. Park your car over there by my black Porsche, and I'll show you around." Thus begins the story that no one will ever believe, but it's true. I was there. Chapter 2. Mr. Cox and I walked through the massive gate. It slowly closed on its own and made a heavy, almost sickening, mechanical thud as it automatically locked behind us. I cannot explain the feeling of panic, dread, and hopelessness that suddenly came over me as I heard that sound and actually felt the ground shake a little. You would have had to have been there to understand. It was eerie. I was nearly overcome with claustrophobia, and I was just inside the fence. I shuddered. Anyway, Mr. Cox seemed eager to tell me everything, sort of like a kid with a new toy. "This is the newest and largest kennel for convicted dogs in the state," he bragged. "There are just over 1,600 dogs in here, and we run it with a staff of only 25. 1,600, I exclaimed. "Why so many?" "Oh no," he corrected me. "The question is, why so few? There are over 2 million dogs in our state and only 14 kennels like this. This is only one of 10 kennels operated by the state. The other 4 are privately owned by ICC, Incarcerated Canines Corporation, operating under state contract. At present, there are 6 large companies and several smaller ones which have gone into the private kennel business." Interrupting him, I asked, "Who owns ICC and those other private kennel companies?" "They are mostly owned by rich folks and senators. The founder of ICC was the former chairman of the Republican Party in Tennessee and friend of the governor. In fact, the governor's wife was a substantial investor in ICC, as was the Speaker of the Tennessee House. Even some judges are shareholders. One of their larger stockholders was recently appointed by the president to be a trial judge in Tennessee. They say he has been in the courtroom as a lawyer on only 2 cases. Some of the families representing their dogs have had more courtroom experience than him. The other kennel companies do not operate in this state, so I do not know as much about them. However, we get a monthly magazine, the Kennel Monthly. Maybe you'd like a back issue. It has ads for the latest security devices available, as well as articles about some of the privately owned kennels. I do know that most of the private kennels are subsidized with tax dollars. In spite of our rapid growth, we can currently only hold 1% of the state's dogs. There are several thousand more dogs that have already been convicted and are on a waiting list to come in when we get space. The waiting list is so long in California, their Kennel Officers Association has proposed building a few mega kennels that can hold up to 20,000 dogs each. Our country has the largest kennel system in the world by far, he announced proudly as we walked past rows of cages. I struggled to imagine what it must be like to be one of these dogs locked in a really small cage. Mr. Cox, if there are 14 kennels in this state, how many kennels like this are there in the country? There are well over 900 kennels nationwide, he boasted. This country has only 5% of the world's dog population. He continues, yet 25% of the world's incarcerated dogs are in our kennels. Proof that our country is the safest place to live. There are now over 2 million dogs in kennels like this across the country. Just 70 years ago, there was only one kennel in the state and it only had 300 dogs. But Congress passed new laws making more things a crime, and judges have been giving longer sentences. The kennel population has increased by over 700% in just the last 40 years. For female dogs, the incarceration rate has risen 1,200% since 1970. State law requires us to have 40 square feet of space for each dog. So we are licensed to house 1,200 dogs in here. But I thought you said there were 1,600 dogs in here now, I said in a questioning manner. Mr. Cox looked a little puzzled and said, "There are." "Well, I don't understand. Doesn't that break the law and overcrowd the dogs?" I asked. He thought for a brief moment and said, "It does overcrowd them some, but hey, they are just dogs. As for breaking the law, it actually doesn't. In a money-saving effort, Congress has authorized us to be overcrowded by 37%. The kennels in California operate at 200% capacity. You see, we are allowed to put in an extra 250 dogs if it is on a temporary basis. That is, if their dog blanket is not attached by Velcro to the floor. The law allows for that." "How long is temporary?" I inquired. "The law does not specify a time limit," he replied, as we slowly walked past hundreds of cages of sad-looking dogs begging for attention. All kennels take advantage of this loophole in the law and are overcrowded, but hey, they are just dogs. "Oh, I see," I stated almost mechanically. "What about the other 150? "Let's walk over to the shed." He smiled as we veered off to the right and walked to the corner of the compound. This will explain the other 150. Chapter 3. "Wow, these cages are even tinier," I said as we approached, "and there sure are a lot of them. What is this area?" "This is the shed," he replied as he pointed to the sign and read, "Special housing to educate dogs. The dogs in here are being educated." I stared at the sign and then at the dogs and said, "I don't understand. It looks like they are being deprived of everything. They don't have room to run around. They are isolated and cannot interact with other dogs. I don't see any toys for them to play with. They can't even see the sun or the sky from their cages. How does this educate them?" He waved his hand slowly toward the cages and answered, "These dogs either broke kennel rules or are under investigation to see if they broke a rule. Depriving them helps educate them, to obey the rules of the kennel. My stomach knotted up as I thought of the poor dogs locked up in there. "How long do you keep them in there?" I asked. "By law, we can only keep them in here for 90 days. However, if we don't have space in the regular kennel, we can take them out for 10 minutes, and then we can legally put them back in for another 90 days. I can't imagine what 6 months locked up in that tiny cage would do to a dog. Do they ever get out for exercise?" I asked. "Oh yes," he said. "By law we have to let them out into that bigger 20-foot by 20-foot cage for 1 hour each day, 5 days a week. It's a real nuisance to our staff though, so we try to schedule the exercise time early in the morning when it is cold and fewer dogs want to go. Plus, we can always cancel if it's raining or we are short on staff that day." "Hello, Esau," Mr. Cox said with a slightly sarcastic tone to the dog on our left. "Esau?" I inquired. "That's an unusual name for a dog." "Mr. Green, Esau is not the dog's name, or Esau is not the dog's name. It's an acronym which describes this dog. It stands for extra, stupid, and ugly. Regardless of how many times we beat and discipline this dog, he will not learn. He'll be back in the shed not long after he gets out. It seemed awfully cruel to me to hear him make fun of the dog that was totally at his mercy at the moment. My mind quickly recalled scores of examples from history where prisoners were treated cruelly by captors just because they could. I decided not to say anything about it and asked instead, "Do the dogs get good food in here?" "Oh yes," Mr. Cox beamed. "All dogs in the kennel get a well-balanced diet, regular annual checkups by the staff vet, and dog biscuits every Christmas and Easter. They get a bath once a month and a new flea collar every 90 days. Even the dogs in the shed get that. Although we try to keep the kennel clean, possibly 70% of the dogs will be carrying an infectious disease when they are released. Dogs that are really sick are often released early to save money, so it's rare for a dog to die in here. However, some dogs just do not respond well to some of the drug therapy provided." "Speaking of money," I replied, "who pays for the medical when you release the sick dog, and who pays for all this? It must cost a fortune to run this kennel." "Oh, it costs a bundle, all right. That's the beauty of it. The dog's owner is responsible for the sick dog's vet bills once he's out. The taxpayers and the dog's family in the state foot the bill for the operational expenses of the kennel. It's all part of the state budget. We charge $20 per day for each dog. If we spend it all, we can justify asking for more next year." Mr. Cox answered. $20 a day, I exclaimed. "That's $600 a month, over $7,000 a year, times 1,600 dogs." My mind raced. "That's over $11 million a year. The state could pay to send a person to college for less than what it costs to keep one dog in here." "Actually, it's more because we charge $25 a day for each dog in the shed. So our budget last year was close to $12 million. Mr. Cox said, smiling, "And you're right about the college. My son just graduated from Middletown Community College. His tuition and books for the year was about $5,000. Over the past 20 years, funding for incarcerating dogs has increased by 127%, while funding on higher education has increased by only 21%. We also get a pretty healthy sum of money from the National Veterinarians Association each year, he said proudly. All right, again, we also get a pretty healthy sum of money from the National Veterinarians Association each year, he said proudly. Chapter 4. What's this about the National Veterinarians Association? I asked slowly and almost mechanically as I was lost in thought. I could not see any good reason why they would give money to a kennel. I was thinking through all the whos, whats, and whys my mind could come up with, and finally the words almost fell out of my mouth before I could even think to stop them. Why would the NVA give money to a kennel? Oh, they do lots of medical experiments with our dogs, he boasted. Since we have so many in one location, they can test new drugs in the food and experiment with new procedures right here. It saves lots of money and red tape for the NVA. Currently, an estimated 45,000 researchers are conducting experiments in more than 10,000 programs. I don't know the statistics of how many dogs are involved. The United States is the only country in the world to officially sanction the use of incarcerated animals in experimental clinical trials. Even the CIA is involved in various mind control experiments. The Nuremberg Code of 1947 was drafted in direct response to the barbarity of the Nazi-era medical experiments on Jews. But, Mr. Green, these are just dogs, so it's okay. It's exciting to know that the dogs they experiment with here may save some human lives in the future. At another kennel, several years ago, they did experiments irradiating the dog's reproductive organs and were able to reduce fertility rates to near zero. That will save thousands of unwanted puppies from being born. Do the dogs or their owners know these experiments are going on, I asked. I don't know, he said, with a slight cock of his head and a quizzical look. I'm sure the NVA does everything the law requires. I don't think it's anything to be concerned about. After all, they're just dogs. Maybe to you they are just dogs, I thought to myself, but I bet they are more than that to their families. This tour can be educational experience for you, Mr. Green. Something you should pass on to your children is the importance of keeping their dogs under control. I had a gut feeling that this tour was going to give me more of an education than I ever dreamed. Mr. Cox, I said, you told me that you had 25 staff here. Do they get paid well? Oh yes, state jobs offer great benefits, he said. They get full medical, dental, life insurance, and lots of state holidays off with pay, plus 3 weeks paid vacation. The lowest paying jobs are the kennel cleaners. They start at about $30,000 per year. Everyone working here at least 20 years gets full retirement benefits at age 57. The privately owned kennels do not pay nearly as well, unless you are a cage broker. That's a sizable pay for an entry-level job, I replied. What do the top people make? Oh, I think the top executives in the Bureau of Kennels start at about $150,000 per year, he said. It sounds like these jobs pay better than what I make, Mr. Cox. How do I get a job here? Sorry, but you can't, Mr. Green. You're too old. What? I demanded. I am only 41, and I am obviously younger than you are, Mr. Cox. Besides, there are laws that protect against age discrimination. Yeah, but Congress makes exceptions to the laws for us because we deal with vicious animals. Even the Attorney General approved these exceptions. I've been working for the BOK for a long time and will retire in 2 years. So, Mr. Green, unless you are a veterinarian, you can't be hired for these jobs, not even as a secretary. They don't want an older workforce here. In fact, we have a mandatory retirement at age 57. So if I don't like retirement, maybe I can come to work for you, Mr. Green. The Attorney General does not have the right to approve exceptions to the law, I stated emphatically. All I know is he did, Mr. Green, and that he decides which laws they will prosecute. I am not in a position to question such matters. Chapter 5. Mr. Cox, you mentioned a cage broker a moment ago. If I may ask, what does he do? He is responsible for seeing that the private kennels are full. His commission can be as much as $5.50 per dog per day. States with overcrowded kennels can send dogs across the country to be incarcerated in a private kennel. The country commissioners where the private kennel is located love it because the country also receives about $1.50 per dog per day. After a judge recently ordered relief from the overcrowding, one private kennel received 1,200 new dogs in just 1 month. But back to our budget. In addition to salaries and benefits, we have to pay for all the dog food, utilities, maintenance of the kennel, and lease payment for the property. I was starting to feel that something fishy was going on, so I asked, commissions? Lease payment? Who owns the property? Without flinching and even a little cocky, it seemed to me Mr. Cox said, "This land belongs to a state senator. We have a 100-year lease. Our lease payment is $10,000 a month. Other senators lease property to other kennels or own companies that supply food, blankets, dog collars, or utilities. What's to stop the cage broker from bribing the judge to order relief of the overcrowding? I mean, if the commissions can be up to $37 per dog per week, the cage broker could be making over $40,000 per week just on that one event of the kennel receiving 1,200 dogs. Mr. Green, judges are selected because of their character being above reproach. I'm certain that when the judge ordered relief from overcrowding, he did so for the benefit of the dogs." Now, if you'll follow me around to the back of the property, you can see some of our dogs at work. The work they do has become vital to our country. Some senators and even some judges profit from the work being performed by some of the dogs. Dogs doing work are attached by a leash and required to rotate the tread wheel, similar to big mill grinders used by local farmers which turn theirs with a mule. It just requires more dogs than it would mules. Or the dog can be forced to do other types of labor, such as pulling a plow for crops, or any type work the expensive mules do. Often the dogs have to be teamed together with multiple teams of dogs to pull skids, wagons, plows, etc. Anything the expensive mules do, we can do here with enough dogs. Many of the grains which the military uses are ground up in kennels like this one. The Kennel Company, NICOR, N-I-C-O-R, which stands for Nationally Institutionalized Canine Operational Resources, did not have to compete for government contracts until recently. In reality, the only way a company could compete with NICOR would be to use foreign imports, which we both know is bad for the economy. Even worse, Congress is now allowing the military to do sole source purchasing of supplies from Iraq and Afghanistan. This will exclude other companies, including NICOR and ICOR, from being the suppliers of these products, which the military was purchasing from NICOR. This is just another example of our government sending jobs out of the country. Mr. Green, the cost of operating the kennel goes on regardless, and NICOR shares a small percentage of their profits with the kennel. These dogs should have to work to help pay for their upkeep. The largest complaint against NICOR comes from businesses which use the expensive mules and cannot compete with the dogs. The government taxes the work done by the mules, but dogs working within the kennel industries are not taxed. In addition, the ASHA rules the government established for animal safety and health do not apply to incarcerated dogs and the kennel industries. Do all the dogs work? I asked. In the old days, most of them had to, but now NICOR cannot expand quick enough to work all the dogs. After all, it is quite a pool of free labor we have. The private kennels are diversifying, finding other ways to work their dogs. Wow, that's quite a setup, I said. I would guess that the senators really want to see this place stay full, don't they? It works out well for almost everyone, Mr. Cox said as he smiled. The Senate passes the laws. The Department of Dog Catchers, DODC, enforce the laws by arresting dogs that break the laws. And the Animal Court determines how long the dogs will be sentenced to stay in the kennel. They are allowed a jury trial, but because most families do not know their country's history, and few jurors know about jury nullification, they often just plead guilty. Here, let me read that again. They are allowed a jury trial, but because most families do not know their country's history, and few jurors know about jury nullification, they often just plead guilty. The sentences are worse if they try to fight it and lose. If we have too many empty spaces, the judges give out longer sentences, or the Senate can pass new laws to be sure we stay at full capacity. The news media cooperates with us as well. Every time a violent dog is arrested, they put the story on TV and in the paper, telling how we are making the state a safer place by taking vicious and dangerous dogs off the street. This keeps the taxpayers feeling good about spending all this money. Chapter 6. Mr. Cox, I have to admit, I haven't heard about jury nullification either. Can you tell me about it? There is a lot about it on the internet. The jury has the right to vote not guilty to nullify bad laws. Most jurors have no clue about their real power. It's no surprise that you do not know, Mr. Green. The Department of Education has worked hard to remove this bit of history from school texts, just as they have to remove from history books how Christianity influenced the founding fathers of this country. Mr. Green, Jurors have the power to nullify a law that they believe to be immoral, unconstitutional, or wrongly applied to the accused simply by returning a verdict of not guilty, regardless of their belief of guilt of the charged violation. Even a Chief Justice has affirmed this right of jurors. It has been an important part of American history, from refusing to learn guilty verdicts against dogs that violated English law, practicing nullification in cases against individuals accused of harboring runaway dogs, and also those accused of violating laws during Prohibition. History tells of hundreds of bad or stupid laws that needed to be repealed. This video will be continued in the next part, in the next video. If you want to purchase the book, you can go to lulu.com, the Kennel, Elijah Green. It's $5.99 and can be downloaded in a PDF format immediately when you buy it.